Welcome to the Lean webinar. Today we're joined by Dylan Harries, who is our strategic dairy farmer who's based in West Wales. Dylan, do you want to give us a wave? And we've also got Jana Hocken, all the way from New Zealand. Jana's got a degree in engineering and her background was working at Toyota in manufacturing. So she's moved into the dairy industry with her husband and since then has worked on how the lean management principles that you maybe more often consider with a factory setting can actually be implemented on farms to help eliminate waste, to save time and cut costs. So welcome, Jana. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thanks, Jamie. Thanks, Dylan.
So just before we get underway, I will just run through a couple of housekeeping points then. All attendees are muted and anyone who wants to ask a question can do so. If you look to the right of your screens, you'll see a little orange box with an arrow. If you hit that and scroll down to where it says questions, there's a box there where you can type your questions and they'll come in directly to us and we'll do our best to answer as many questions as we possibly can this evening, but we've got lots of people with us, so we may not get through them all. All questions that come in are anonymous, so there's no such thing as a silly question then, if you like. Today's webinar is being recorded, so it'll be available on the AHDB website and on YouTube afterwards. And if you're registered with Dairy Pro and you'd like to collect Dairy Pro points for this evening, then please provide your name, your farm name, the postcode and your Dairy Pro number in that questions box that I mentioned before, and we'll be able to allocate your points. If you don't have your number with you, just stick your email address in and we can contact you directly. We'll be aiming to finish this evening around 9:15. I know for dairy farmers out there, tomorrow's morning milking perhaps doesn't feel that far away, but we've got a really great evening planned. So moving on to the strategic dairy farm network then, we've got a map here which shows the plethora of sites that we've got, and if I draw your eye right far west into the bottom corner of Wales, that's where Dylan and Hannah farm, and we can see a picture there of Tyddyn-yr-Eglwys farm. I suppose it's wild West Wales, Dylan, but green rolling hills. Rains a lot, I think, but that makes for good grass growing country. Yeah, could you tell us a little bit about the farm at Tyddyn?
Yeah, so me and Hannah farm here in a contract farming agreement with Kim and Bryony Petty. We farm around 280 hectares, of which about 160 hectare of grazing platform, with the rest being kind of a young stock grazing and silage that we bring home for the shoulders of the year. Yeah, south-facing farm, so yeah, we can grow a lot of grass here, but it does burn in the summer if we don't have rain regularly.
Okay. Is that all grass silage that you're making?
Yeah, mostly grass silage. We do a little bit of whole crop, and we grow about 15 to 20 hectares of kale, just outwinter heifers or young stock on.
Yeah, excellent. So who's in the farm team then? Because that's quite critical, I think, to the lean management topic.
Yeah, so it's myself and Hannah, and then we have 2 full-time members of staff, and we have 2 relief milkers. And then through calving, we kind of source an extra labour unit, I suppose, to just give us a push on and yeah, get us through the busiest kind of 2 months.
Okay, and so how does sort of the workload divvy between the team then? Do people have specific roles and responsibilities, or their areas of responsibility then?
Yeah, so I tend to look after the cows and the kind of the grazing side of things. I look after, Hannah looks after the young stock, and and then, or the calves with a member of one of the full-time boys. And then, yeah, the relief milkers, myself and the other full-timer, look after the cows and make sure that that kind of goes to plan.
Excellent. So what's happening on the farm at the moment? I think you're in your dry period, spring block calving, yeah. So it's all about to kick off again.
Yeah, so we're in our dry period. We are due to start calving on the 20th of January. We've had 9 calve in the last few days, and yeah, it's imminent.
So is the parlour back up and running then?
Yeah, just about. Yeah, got everything done, and yeah, it's just until you get into the actual calving and back into the routine of it, it's yeah, I'm sure there's something we've forgotten to do.
Oh, so we're looking at a picture of you now in the milking parlour, and for the people watching, probably looking down the length of that parlour thinking, wow, that is huge. You've put in quite a bit of new infrastructure there. Yeah, so big herringbone parlour, but so what drove the investment to that, and what else did you put in at the same time as that milking parlour?
So when myself and Hannah came here in 2013, there were about 330 milking cows, a 2040 herringbone milking parlour, and it was 500 acres really of land. We were fortunate to get some more land adjoining onto the grazing platform, which allowed us to expand to utilise more of the grazed grass to produce milk. So we made the choice, or made the decision along with Kim Bryony that we built a new slurry pit, a self-feed silage pit, cubicle housing, outdoor calving pad, and then we built the parlour as well, a 5100.
Yeah. And if I remember correctly, it's a long time since I've been to your farm now with lockdowns, but there's a big meeting room, coffee room sort of area for you to make sure that you get your communication right, and somewhere for staff to meet and that kind of thing as well.
Yeah, so that was one of the kind of priorities, I suppose. In the old parlour yard, there was nowhere really for us to have any sort of data or information available for everybody in any sort of organised manner. So yeah, we were kind of set out to have a decent facility so people could we could have lunch together, or a coffee break, and we could have a sit down on the sofa and just make it try and make it as a pleasant place to work as we can, just so people enjoy coming to work.
Yeah. And have you seen the difference?
Yes, definitely. We've used it a lot. Kind of training. In 2019 we did lots of training days through Farming Connect. That was good because we had the facility to do it on farm. Yeah, it's easy to have a meeting kind of somewhere warm and dry, and we can put information up.
Yeah, oh, excellent. Because I'm thinking back to when you agreed to be a strategic farm host, we were noting down some of your farming goals, and they're sort of here on the screen now. But you talked a lot about constantly striving for efficiency, wanting to reduce waste. And even more recently, I can remember a telephone conversation with you where you were talking about trying to implement the principles of reduce, reuse and recycle on the farm. And I think that was where we started thinking about asking Jana for some help and thinking about lean management on the farm. But can you just explain to us a little bit about how you started out on your lean farm journey then? Because it started actually long before we met with Jana.
Yeah, so I suppose going from when we had 300 cows, it was pretty much me and Hannah with a member of staff, and we didn't have this, we didn't need the same level of kind of information visually, because we were working with each other in a small team all the time. And then as the farm grew, it became quite apparent that we needed to have some sort of visual management. So it probably started 2016, 2017. Just little things like grazing planners, whiteboards, staff rotas, just real basic things really. But that's when the journey started, and then going on as we've progressed, it's become quite apparent. Instead of focusing on the kind of the labour units, kind of working hours per labour unit, and try to make it a reasonable working week rather than like allowing for a 50-60 hour week to be acceptable.
Yeah, and I think at AHDB we repeatedly hear lots of farmers talking about time being sort of a major limiting factor to their business development, and I think that's a cross-sector challenge, probably not just a dairy farm challenge, and sort of chasing down that elusive work-life balance. And I know that Jana, on your farm at home, you've got some pretty impressive protocols in place then to try and help with that. So I wonder if now is a good time, Jana, if I let you introduce yourself and hand over to you to talk us through sort of some of the basics of what is lean management, how we can get involved, and perhaps tell us a little bit about your lean journey in New Zealand.
Yeah, sure. Well, welcome everybody. It's good to have you this evening. Hopefully everyone's staying safe. Hopefully you can see my screen. And I'll start the presentation. So for some of you, maybe you've already read my book and seen some of the things that I'm doing on social media, so you might know some of my background. But my background over the last 10 years, so my first 10 years were within a manufacturing environment, working with Toyota. I did quite a lot of work actually with Toyota across UK because I was based in Brussels for a few years with the European headquarters. So I have spent quite a bit of time in the UK. But that was my initial introduction to lean manufacturing within that automotive process, I guess. And then the last 10 years I've spent in lean manufacturing consulting, or lean consulting. And the last 10 years I have worked in pretty much every single industry. So from banking to defence, I've done quite a bit of work in healthcare, finance, IT, rail, a lot of work in rail, mining, and more recently in agriculture. And when my husband decided to return back to his family dairy farm in 2013, I continued with my consulting work, but I obviously became partly involved in the farming. And it was quite a new experience for me because I had absolutely no background in farming at all at that level, and particularly dairy farming. I had done a bit of work in viticulture, but that was about the extent of my agricultural work. But it became extremely apparent, I guess the most obvious thing when we came back to farming was the work hours. So in New Zealand, it is quite typical that the shift pattern is an 11-day, 3-day off pattern. That's probably the most common. However, also very common are 10 days on and 12 days on, 2 days off. And in some cases, there are farms that work 20 days on, for example, or 22 days on and 2 days off. So the hours was one of the things I immediately thought, wow, this is just absolutely crazy. This is not sustainable at all. And then when we started farming, I just started seeing a lot of things that were happening on farm. Problems, the same problems that would keep coming up over and over again. I would see, people driving up, driving down, driving all over the place, trying to fetch things that were in awkward locations, in locations that weren't near where you actually needed it. A lot of these kind of things. And I started thinking, well, maybe lean is quite relevant to farming. And the more I got involved in farming, the more apparent it became that all this stuff that I'd been teaching all these other clients around the world was absolutely relevant to the farm. And so we started our lean journey. We probably started our lean journey more intensively around 4 years ago. And we have seen some excellent results out of that. Most certainly from a efficiency point of view, from a cost reduction point of view, work hour reduction point of view, and so forth. And so that's sort of been our burning platform to start. We wanted to create a business where we had better work-life balance, we had reduced work hours, but also a business where we didn't feel like we had to be in it 24 hours, 7 days a week for it to operate the way we wanted it to operate. We wanted to be able to create a business that was sustainable and was able to operate essentially on its own with a good team in place. And are we perfect? Absolutely not. So this is not going to happen overnight. There's a whole variety of things that need to be done, and depending on your own farm's priorities and what's important for you as a farming business, you will pick and choose the kind of things that you want to implement out of the lean management philosophy. But this webinar, I'll talk to you and introduce you to some of the basics around lean and why it's relevant to farming, because there most certainly is a feeling among, most certainly in the agricultural industry, that, well, how is lean relevant? We're not manufacturing cars, we're not a production process, and so forth. But actually we are. We're in the production business. We're producing milk in the dairy farm. I work with lots of other farmers such as sheep and beef, and they're in the business of producing meat products or wool products. So we are producing things. Of course, it is a little bit different, but most certainly these principles apply. So we'll get started. So the first thing I do want to do is a poll question. So I'll hand over to Jamie and she'll pop up a poll on the screen.
Yep, so the poll's up on the screen now. We'll just give people a few minutes to vote. So the question that you're being asked is, have you heard of lean or lean management or lean manufacturing before? And there's only 2 options, yes or no. I can see people are voting, they're still coming in, so we'll just give it a little bit longer. So it's just collecting responses. It's not quite settled yet, but we're looking at around 58% of people saying yes, they've heard of lean management before, and 43% saying no.
Excellent. Okay, thank you. So after this webinar, you'll all be able to say yes. So I'll just go back to my slides. So what is lean? I've tried to keep this simple. If you go onto line and Google it, you'll find millions of different definitions. But realistically, and it's as simple as this, it's essentially a management or a production or an operational system for your business. And that could be any business, whether it's a farm or a cafe or a bank. And it's essentially a way of working, and it's a philosophy to how you're operating your business. It focuses on a few key things. It focuses on waste elimination, so eliminating anything in your business that does not add value to your product or to the customer, and focusing on those value-added things. It's about working smarter, not harder. It's about being able to do more with less, but through better work practices and more efficient work practices. And importantly, it's also about creating an environment that is continuously improving. So you've got this continuously improving mindset. And this quote comes from directly when I used to work in Toyota. This is one of the key things that we used to say. And the target was to be able to produce the best product that the customer wants with the highest quality, just in time, and at the lowest cost. Now, so as you can see, it means that having a lean system in your farm is a holistic system. It's not just focused on efficiency or cost cutting. It's a holistic system about the entire business being excellent in all the elements that are important. And most certainly these days, there's a whole heap of other things that are really critical to a successful business, and a viable farm business in particular, particularly with what the expectations are from community. And that, you know, that is safety, people and animal welfare, environment, your sustainability, being ethical, using ethical practices. All those things will come in that lean system. So it is a very holistic system of how you're operating your business. If you've got any questions as we go through this webinar, do pop them up on the screen, because it's a good opportunity to ask those questions as we work through the different slides so that we don't miss anything out. So one of the fundamental foundations of a lean system is continuous improvement. And this is about creating a business that is continuously improving. Every day, small things that you're changing to improve so that tomorrow is better than today. And I think that's a really important thing. So often lean gets a really negative image, I guess, because people think that it's all just about cutting everything out, you know, skimping on things and so forth. But it's not that at all. If you look at the real, I guess, background behind the lean management system, which comes out of the Toyota production system, it is about creating continuous improvement and just having this pursuit of perfection. So having a vision for your farm business, what would perfect look like? And by having that perfect vision, it enables you to then strive to continuously improve to try and achieve that perfect. Now, that perfect is never going to be achieved, because the perfect will always move, because as technology changes, as consumer demands changes, our policies and regulations change, we have to constantly change on farm as well to adapt to those things. So that perfect will change as time goes on. So if we do continuously improve and have this pursuit of perfection, naturally we're going to focus on eliminating waste. Improving productivity will reduce time, improve quality, reduce costs, do all these wonderful things. And at the end of the day, that's going to result in us being a more profitable business as well. And a lot of the stuff that I talk about, and if you visit my website, you'll see a whole heap of different resources and little videos that show you some of the things that we're doing on our farm. And you'll see a lot of it is very simple, common sense stuff. This is not, sometimes it can be quite technical in certain industries, but most certainly a lot of the lean tools and the lean thinking is really simple and common sense stuff. And many farmers will see themselves that, oh, this is actually some of the stuff that we do, without realizing that there's actually a philosophy around it. So it is simple, common sense stuff. The biggest challenge for us as farmers is to accept that we're not perfect. And even 4 years later on our journey, our farm is most certainly not lean and perfect. We've implemented a lot of tools. We've implemented a lot of the cultural element to really create a team that believes in this, and culturally it's just in their DNA, and that's where our focus has been. But we're most certainly not perfect. So it is a journey. It doesn't happen overnight. And we every day see opportunities for improvement. So the biggest challenge is to accept that you're not perfect and that there are plenty of things that you can be doing to improve, and to really challenge the status quo. And that's probably one of the most difficult things, is that, and I guess one of the advantages that fortunately we have on our farm is because both myself and Matt, my husband, have come from different industries. When we go on farm, nothing is for granted. So we challenge everything. And I think probably if you asked our team, they would definitely tell you that probably one of the key things that I do is every single day ask why. And why are we doing that? Why do we need to do that? And it's only when you start challenging all of those practices that you can start to create some real improvements, and not accepting that status quo. And that's most certainly where we've made some transformational changes in some basic processes like dry off and calving and some other processes, just by thinking completely out of the box. and really changing the way that the process is done. So that's a little bit of background, I guess, to lean. And one of the really great quote that I picked up when I was in Toyota is this one here. And it's basically doing the right things will get you the right results. And I've sort of adapted it a little bit to doing the right things the right way at the right time will give you the right results. So if you remember that, and I think everyone, whenever something goes wrong, if you look back and have a look at why it went wrong, and you really ask yourself, well, what really happened? Often you'll say, well, I actually didn't do it the right way the first time round. So, and that's where a lot of our problems and mistakes and issues do come from, when we don't do things the right way at the right time.
We've got quite a few questions coming in now, Jana. I think you generated a little bit of interest when you were talking about working week and rotas. And certainly the way you're talking about learning from other industries, it embodies really everything that our knowledge exchange program is about, you know, looking at other people's farms and trying to learn from them. Somebody's picked up about Australia's got quite strict employment laws around the working hours that people are able to work. So what can we learn from them and the way they operate their businesses?
So it's interesting. So I've done quite a bit of work in Australia, and I used to work so I started in Toyota in Australia. So unions were very big. I had a lot, when I was working in Toyota, I actually had a lot to do with the unions. The labour laws are actually quite different to New Zealand. I think New Zealand labour laws are a lot less strict as they are in Australia. But working with the farmers in Australia, yes, they do have strict labour hours. From memory, I think it's a 36 or 40-hour work week. Everything over that is paid as overtime. And so, of course, and I think that's probably one of the biggest problems in New Zealand. And I keep telling farmers in New Zealand, this is coming. We're not going to avoid this. There will be a time where we have those kind of labour hours. And what that tells me is that if you are working on really long hours, working 11 days on, 3 days off, even 22 days on, 2 days off, and that's how your business is operating, and it's relying on those kind of labour hours to operate, then that's not sustainable. It's a problem. Now, of course, here in New Zealand, and I'm not so familiar in Australia, but possibly in Australia as well, you do have housing that's part of the farm. So farmers provide housing, and that's part of the salary package. So that does compensate, I guess, in terms of ensuring minimum wage requirements and so forth. But still, if you are relying on quite significant hours, your business isn't sustainable. And so the farmers that I have worked with in Australia, when they are relying on huge work hours, obviously that comes at a cost to their business. In New Zealand, it doesn't. So if you're on a salary, it doesn't. So farmers, you know, have it a little bit easier here. But in Australia, it's coming at a cost to your business. So, and not only, if you're working crazy hours, and I'm talking, you know, 70, 80-hour weeks, that is not sustainable in terms of your mental well-being and your health and safety. So the farmers in Australia most certainly are very interested in this the lean principles, and how they can use those to start to reduce those work hours to reduce obviously the strain on their people and their teams, but also to reduce their labour costs. So hopefully that's answered a little bit those questions.
Yeah,
Is there anything else?
Yeah, a follow-up one there. Well, is there room for sensible margin for insurance in lean? So, you know, for instance, we want to rear enough heifer replacements to have our numbers for next year, but, you know, what about a safety margin in case something goes wrong?
I'm not sure I quite understand the question, but if that's in terms of your risk, I guess a risk margin and having a you know, if your target is to rear 500 heifers and you expect that 10% will die, I'm not quite sure if that's where that question is going. Obviously, those things are built into your actual targets. So if you, based on your historical data, and this is where data is really powerful, if you have certain targets of how much you want to rear, and you know based on your historical data that there is a loss, whatever percentage it is, you need to work out, well, am I happy to accept that loss of 10%, or is 10% not good enough and we need it to be 2%, which means that then your margin has less variability in it. So if that's the case, I would be working on continuous improvement to understand why your loss is 10% and how you can bring that loss up to, you know, perhaps 1%, so that you're able to better cope with that kind of a variable rather than a 10% variable, which makes it much more difficult for your business planning and for your profitability. I'm not sure if that's answered the question. That's sort of my understanding of that question.
Yeah, I think we will move on, but just for clarification, I think one of the perhaps differences between the UK and New Zealand is that some farmers here are under TB restriction, and that's sort of a little bit of a threat over best laid plans. But yeah, we'll let you move on with the presentation. Yeah. There are a few more questions we'll come back to.
Yeah, okay. So I guess just going back sort of to something related to that question. In lean, and I talk about this in my book, The Lean Dairy Farm, lean isn't going to support any external factors. So you've got internal factors and external factors. External factors are things like your weather, your interest rates, what's happening in the economics or political landscape. Those things are external factors. Lean isn't going to change any of that. What lean is going to help you with is your internal factors. So things that you can control within your business, and that is what you do, how you do things, and when you do things. Those are things that you can control and determine in your business, and that's where lean is most certainly going to help. With the external factors, while lean is not going to change those, it will help you overcome the challenges around those in a much better, more controlled way. If you apply the various systems and processes to your business, it will most certainly help you be in a much better position to overcome and navigate through challenges that are unpredictable, if that makes sense. So I think that's just a really important note to keep in mind. So as an example, in New Zealand, you know, people think we've got lots of rain, and we've had an absolutely fabulous season this year. You couldn't have, it's a textbook season that we've had this year. We had an amazing calving. We've had constant rain all the way through our summer, and we've just started irrigating the farm now. Normally we're irrigating in October. So just for you, for some that might not be aware, but we're in summer at the moment. But in the past, we've had droughts. So last season, we had droughts. So we made, through all of our lean work and also process improvements and cost reductions, we made some savings, some significant savings, but we had a drought. And so those savings were then put into feed. So we've learnt from those kind of things, and we know, well, we can't prevent droughts. We aren't able to prevent low milk prices. There was a huge risk of some significantly low milk prices this year due to COVID, but we can prepare our business for those kind of circumstances. So as a result, we made some significant changes this year in our farming operations, from looking at how we're going to manage a drought situation again, from our cow numbers and our stocking rate per hectare, so a whole heap of different, from how we mitigate interest rates, so basing our business on a model where we're making profits even when the milk prices are right at, you know, $5.50 or whatever they are. So we've been able to, and we're most certainly not perfect, again, we're working through it still, but by making those kind of changes and getting your business prepared for these adverse environmental or political or you know, economical things, you're much better prepared to be resilient and get through it. if you just hope that milk prices are going to be up, if we just hoped that we're not going to have a drought, then we would just get hit hard again, and we wouldn't, and that's when farmers do struggle and don't make money, and have some real issues with stock numbers and so forth. So it's about getting much better prepared through using these kind of tools so that you're able to mitigate situations that aren't in your control, all of those external factors. So I'll just move on. A really important thing about lean is to realize that all these myths that I'll talk about now, that is not lean. So lean is not just a cost-cutting activity at all costs or at all expenses. It's not about a people-cutting activity. It's not about cutting corners in your processes and the way that you do things and the way that you farm. It's not about skimping on things like animal welfare and people safety and equipment maintenance just so that you can cut costs. It's most certainly not about making people and animals and resources on your farm, such as equipment, facilities, etc., work harder. And it's not also a short-term project. So I think it's really important to realize that, because a lot of time when I talk about lean, the immediate reaction is, oh, is that just about cutting everything down and working with absolute bare minimal? Absolutely not. It's about working smarter, not harder. It's about cutting out the stuff that you're totally wastefully doing that's actually creating a more negative result for your farm rather than a positive result. And as I go through the slides, you'll see some of the examples of how just focusing on having a really good process not only improves your people safety, animal welfare, sustainability, and all your production, etc. results, but it also reduces your costs. So this will actually create a much better result while all those other factors are actually improving as well. So why would you want to start applying lean? And I think it's really important for me to say that this isn't something I've made up. I'm not that clever. This management philosophy has been around for decades. It was developed it's probably been around actually since the original concepts. Some of those original concepts, have been around since the 19th century. It was developed a little bit further, some of those concepts, by Ford in the early 1900s. And in the 1950s, Toyota really started to evolve this system of way of working. And over the last few decades, the approach has spread to almost every industry sector, and it's most certainly not new in agriculture either. There are a lot of farms in the UK, in the Netherlands, in Ireland, in the US that are starting to apply lean concepts. And what that proves, what that shows me, is that this stuff works, and we've most certainly proved it on our farm as well. But this stuff does work for your farm business, and regardless of what size business you are, what size farm, if you're a husband and wife team or a larger team, these principles will work for you on your farm. And what they do is they essentially help us to create a better business. They help us to eliminate and improve some of our challenges, frustrations, our problems that we're having on farm, and they help us to achieve our goals much more effectively. So I think I'm going to do another poll question now, and I'll hand over to Jamie to answer this poll.
You should be able to see the poll now on your screen. What is your biggest challenge at the moment? So you need to choose one option. So it's either time or the work-life balance, cost, farm performance or results, communication, people, or dedicating time to actually work on the business. So if you could all cast your votes, we'll give you a few minutes to do that. Looks like an early leader is the time work-life balance at the moment. But voting's not over yet, so if you disagree, cast your vote. Last few votes are just coming in. So hopefully everyone can see the results of the poll. So we've got time and the work-life balance is the biggest challenge for 38% of the people that voted. Cost 12%, farm performance or results at 18, communication people at 15, and spending time working on the business is 16.
Okay, excellent. So, and that's not dissimilar to the farmers that I talked to in Australia and New Zealand either. So, which is great, and most certainly that has been one of our key driving factors for our farm business. And so once you identify what are your specific problems, frustrations, or burning platforms on your farm, that's a really good starting point to work out, well, this is my priority. This is why I want to start implementing some of these lean tools to help me with this specific burning platform or frustration that I have. So if time and your work-life balance is a big factor, then most certainly some of these lean tools will help with that, address some of those issues. So this is some of the work that we've been doing with Dylan, and I'll let Dylan jump in and talk about some of these things. But in, I guess, farming, there's a lot of different lean tools, and what I've selected here is probably the 4 key tools that will make the immediate, not immediate, but the most impact initially for your farm business. And so the first step is really to identify the waste, the problems and the challenges on our farm. So when we want to apply lean, that's our first step, is identify, well, what is the waste that we have on our farm? Where are the problems and the challenges that we're facing? And then the second step is to start focusing on eliminating and minimizing this waste using our lean tools. So the 4 key tools that we'll talk about briefly today are the 8 wastes, standard work, visual management, and 5S, which is basically workplace organization. In terms of 8 wastes, and if you pick up my book, you'll be able to, there's a whole chapter on this that goes into detail, which we won't have time to go through today. But there's a lot of stuff that we do on farms that we think is normal, is a normal way of working on our farms, but actually isn't really value added. And I'll go through this example. Some of these figures, oh, sorry, go back. Some of these figures are very much from our own farm business, but I just want to give you, I guess, a demonstration of how powerful lean can be to your farm business. So on the left-hand side, we've got the normal farm, and this is a farm where there were 3 paddocks grazed. Those 3 paddocks, this is instead of 1 paddock grazed, and that was because there were gates that were left open, so the cows went frolicking off into the next paddock where the grass was greener, munched up on that. Then someone drove past and thought, oh, why are the cows, they saw a half grazed paddock, and it was in the middle of peak lactation, which is important for the cows to be feeding a lot. And they thought, well, why is that, those cows, why are they not eating so well? Something must be wrong with the grass. So they went and devised a whole new grazing plan, moved the cows to a 3rd paddock and let them graze more, and only to find out the next day that someone had in fact left the gate open, so they were already in 2 paddocks, hence why they were partly grazed. And obviously that was a waste of all of that feed, a waste of people's time redoing grazing plans and so forth. So that is a real instance from our farm several years ago. 10 kilometres driven in a tractor because stuff isn't in the right place, and you're driving back and forth with 0 planning, 0 identification of our key actions, etc. 10 mastitis treatments, 2,000 litres of water used, simply because there was chaos in the shed, there was not enough time to hose down the platform, the sun came out, dried out the entire ramps and feed pad, etc. And of course then you had to use up more water to try and clean it up. 50 litres of teat spray used. So again, that's because no one's ever calibrated the teat sprays. So every single day, twice a day, the teat sprayers are applying more teat spray than is actually needed, and we're using up a lot more teat spray. 5,000 litres of milk down the drain, because no processes were in place. The taps are all poorly identified, weren't turned on, so the milk went into the wrong place. And after all of that, we've had a 15-hour workday. So then we've started applying some lean concepts, and this is what a lean farm looks like. 1 paddock grazed, 1 kilometre driven in tractor, because we knew exactly what we were doing and where we were going. The stuff was in the right place. Only 1 mastitis treatment, because we've had good processes in place to monitor that and to treat cows. 800 litres of water used, 30 litres of teat spray used, no milk down the drain, and we've had a 10-hour workday. So as you can see, while we've worked less, we've actually created much better results, simply because we haven't wasted our time on a whole heap of preventable problems and issues that are very commonplace in our farm. So it's and a lot of those numbers are absolutely our farm. So the water, the teat spray, you know, milk down the drain, the kilometres of tractor driving, the paddocks graves, that's all stuff that has come from our farm from several years ago before we started implementing this. And since we've implemented some of those lean tools, particularly things like standardised work weeks, we have not had cows in the wrong paddock for at least 2 years. So that just gives you a really good demonstration of how powerful and simple this lean philosophy is for your farming business. Let me just go there. So one of the tools that we'll talk about and that we've worked with Dylan, and I'll hand over to Dylan in a second just to talk about his experience of this, is standardised work. So these are some examples of standardised work that we've had on our farm. If you go to my website, I've got a few 2-minute videos that walk through some of these things, so you'll be able to see them in more detail. But we've introduced things like standardised work week roles. We've introduced visual, simple 1-page standards in our team offices for some of our key processes. We've got a standardised season plan. So everything that we do in the season is standardised. So essentially anyone pretty much can come to our business and basically, even if they don't know anything about farming, they could just follow that season plan. And if they don't understand something, they ask, but they could run the business. So what I guess you can see here is it's all visual, it's all standardized, and we're basically taking knowledge and information out of our heads and putting it onto a visual format so that everyone understands, and it's not just in somebody's head, which is extremely powerful when you're operating a business. So Dylan, I guess this is one of the key areas that we were talking about right from the start, is standardized work weeks for you, and it's most certainly helped us reduce our work hours considerably. But how have you found, I guess, that particular tool and the challenges for you around that?
I think the biggest thing it highlighted for us was if we try and be as organised as we can and have some sort of structure to our day, we can create time for, well, ourselves or individuals on the farm. And also if there is an area that's kind of not being focused on, you can delegate it to a person and kind of pass that responsibility to somebody else. So there's two things really. It's created time and it gives responsibility.
Yeah. And that's most certainly one of the things, if you do start, just even, honestly, even just visualizing what you're doing on a piece of paper, taking it out of your head and putting it on a piece of paper starts to really help you, and if you've got other people working in your team, to see, wow, is there a better way that we can be reorganizing this workload or allocating specific responsibilities to different people? And that's most certainly one of the things that helped us considerably move from the 11-day, 3-day. When we first came to the farm, you know, we were on that typical 11-day, 3-day roster, and we moved to our 5-day, 2-day roster. And, you know, we're still on a 50-hour work week, which is considered low in New Zealand over that 5 days. But we're constantly, our ideal is a 40-hour work week. And so that's what we're constantly striving for. And most certainly, obviously, over this season, it's been a really interesting experiment because of COVID, even though we weren't impacted so significantly. But in April and May, we had lockdown level 4. And so we were only able to work on absolutely essential tasks. So our work weeks were actually around 30 or 35 hours. Which was a great experiment. Obviously, some key things didn't get done, but it means we've got some good things to work towards to achieve that target. Anything else that you'd like to add, Dylan?
Oh, Dylan, if you don't mind me asking you, I remember when we were talking about the standard work week, I can't remember which one of the boys, but one of the boys came up with the idea of maybe moving lunchtime to being a little bit earlier because they could see the potential that that freed up longer between lunch break and starting milking, and felt that they could maybe achieve a bit more. How did that go?
Yeah, so I think before, people, like, we usually stop for lunch maybe 1:30, and you know, we'd be back up from lunch by about 2:15, and then you'd left you kind of half an hour to do a job before it was time to start milking, and nothing really got done in that half an hour. It was just an opportunity for people to wait and yeah, might do the odd thing that wasn't really that important and didn't really need doing, whereby pulling it forward and kind of trying to allow like an hour's slot between the end of lunch and milking time, it gives you time to do something significant. Yeah, just gives you that bit more time.
Yeah,
Really little helps, I think, doesn't it?
Yeah. And I think it's important to also note that even if you work for yourself and you're the only person in the farm business, doing something like this for yourself, it's a really great time management tool, and it starts to help you identify where you're spending your time. And if you're spending too much of your time on non-value added, or you know, what I call the $10 tasks, and not enough time on planning, you know, the $1,000 tasks, or the £1,000 tasks, I should be saying, then that's going to impact your business. And I'll give you an example on our dry stock block. So we've got about 500 beef and young stock on another dry stock block, and we've got a manager there. Well, he's managing the whole operation now, but he's managing that dry stock block as well. And originally, going back probably 2 or 3 years ago, one of the key things as part of the standard work is we introduced a planning session. So on Mondays, it had to be at least 2 hours of planning, inputting data into all of our systems and so forth. And he really struggled with that because he thought, well, I'm not on farm doing stuff. I'm not putting up fences or, you know, moving stock. And I feel really bad. It just feels like I'm not working. But actually that 2 hours in the office of his planning time was the most value added amount of work that he could do. And he realized that very quickly. If he did dedicate that time as part of his standard work week on that Monday, the rest of the week actually just flowed. There wasn't unpredictable stuff that was popping up because it was really well planned. All the data was in, you know, decision making was well done. So it is a really powerful tool, even if you work on your own. So I'll just move on to the next one. So the next extremely powerful tool is visual management. And this is about starting to visualize information. And again, this is some examples of from our farm. So we have improved. This photo is quite old, but if you have a look at the videos online on my website, you'll see the update. I actually take you through our visual boards so you can see that in detail. But we started off with just a simple board like that and then moved into a much more detailed, structured system. So taking information again out of your head and putting it up on a wall, even if you work for yourself, again is an extremely important time management and planning and organizational tool, and it will help you prioritize, better, it will help you focus better, it will help reduce your stress and frustration because it's not all in your head, so you're not cluttering your head with stuff. If you have it out in a visual space, you just are in much better control of what you need to be doing, your key activities, your key tasks, you know, ticking off actions, your goals, your metrics, all those kind of things. So a really, really powerful tool. Again, in my book, I take you through step by step how to implement some of these tools. And if you have a team that you're working with, I can't recommend enough this tool. It's probably one of the key ones that has made a transformational difference to our team. It's the one tool that helped us, and we've implemented this about 3 years ago or 3.5 years ago, and the team operate this, the team run it. It has sustained for that time, and the team themselves say they're the ones that developed this, they designed the boards. They themselves say that this is the one key thing that has helped them improve efficiency, etc., because everybody has the same information, everyone is on the same page, everyone knows what's going on, it's not stuck in somebody's head. If Matt and I aren't on farm and we're overseas, even during COVID, we were having our team meetings over Zoom, and it meant that one person could update the boards, take a photo. We share the photos after every team meeting on our group WhatsApp, and that's our meeting recording. But it meant that via Zoom we could still have meetings because all the information was there. So it makes life so much easier, it makes your business much more efficient. We use graphs, so the team update graphs every week to monitor some of our key metrics, and so they themselves can see the trends, if we're going in a positive trend or a negative trend, and therefore they're able to make much more real-time live decision-making decisions. So an extremely powerful tool. Dylan, this is another one that we've talked about over our sessions. How do you find this tool, and I guess, you know, how easy or difficult it's been to implement?
Yeah, so I suppose we started off with kind of a visual management board 3 or 4 years ago. It's been an ongoing development, I suppose, from just having a few scribbles in a corner with different kind of sections of jobs I needed doing and a grazing planner, one thing or another. And yeah, it's having it up so everybody can see it, and having like a shopping list. So once a week, people know what supplies we need, rather than go in to get supplies for 3 or 4 days a week. It's just one trip. Or if, you know, problems with fencing or anything really, if it's up there and people can see it, somebody will kind of get the job sorted, or you can delegate it to somebody. But yeah, if it's all in your head, it's pretty much impossible to kind of keep everybody organized.
Yeah, absolutely, you're right. And I think that's a really good point about even the farm maintenance. If you do have all the farm maintenance visualized, if it's visualized by paddock or farm area, for example, it means that you're much more efficient when you go and do that particular job. So you can allocate, you know, one person to go to this part of the farm, and these are all the things that need to be done in that part of the farm. So it means that you come to the job prepared because you've brought all of the tools that you need, and you're not having to go back and forth. I hear instances where you've got two people or even more people that will go to the same part of the farm to fix 3 different things. That is all waste. So that is all time and efficiency waste. Or they go to the farm, to a particular paddock to put up a fence, and then realize that there's a problem with the trough, so they have to go back and get you know, water fittings or whatever it is. So that is all waste. So by having these kind of things out visualized, you're just in a much better position to plan much more effectively around anything maintenance, you know, workload, allocating responsibilities and stuff like that. Anything else you want to add, Dylan?
No, just, I suppose, the development of the board now to kind of the end of, or through the time with you, Jana, so we're setting up kind of goals and targets for the whole team. So a lot of that is based on what the team felt that they would benefit more of. So we have like a monthly milk target, and a vet and med target, and machinery kind of breakages or maintenance target, just so that the whole team see the effect of different wastes, I suppose.
Yeah, and that's really powerful for the team. It makes the team feel good when they can actually start to see the impact that some of their actions and improvements are having on the direct results of the business.
One thing we did as part of the project was use flip chart paper to try and help Dylan design new formats for the board, so that you can have a real play with the actual design without committing or printing anything at expensive cost. So it's a really cheap way of just having a play and taking a step into lean management visual boards without overly committing. So it's a good first step.
Absolutely. Grab butcher's paper. It's a great way to involve your team if you work with other people, but even for yourself to get things out of your head. And that's exactly when we started the process. We just got butcher's paper, stuck it all on the wall. The team just drew up what they wanted. We brainstormed the kind of information, how it should look. And then we printed out templates just via Word to make it look more realistic, played around with that, and then after that, once we were happy with the result, we went out and bought whiteboards and did it a bit more professionally. But it's an evolving process as well, so we've most certainly evolved our boards over the time, and as we get new team members in, sometimes they come up with some great ideas of how to even visualize something even further, and so we make those improvements so that our boards are evolving and relevant to the team with the stuff that's needed.
One thing, Dylan, I know that you did value was the development of the safety cross. Do you want to just explain a little bit about that?
Yeah, so it's something that I picked up on one of Jana's videos. So it's basically a cross with every day of the month kind of in a cross format. So I think I'm right in saying this, Jana. So if it's an accident or incident-free day, it just gets a green tick. If it's a close shave, you just put an orange or a yellow cross or a tick on. Or if it's an incident, then it has a red mark on. It's just well, my hunch is we're probably going to find patterns of near misses when we're at our kind of highest peak of workload. That's my hunch. Yeah, so that's something that we're going to implement, or we've started implementing as well.
Yeah, it's great, and that comes from, you know, most certainly most industries, construction, mining, rail, some of those really dangerous industries, and farming isn't a particularly safe industry. In New Zealand, farming's, I think, one of the key death industries, so it is a dangerous industry, and most certainly things like safety crosses, which are very common in some of the other industries, are a really valuable tool to just try and create that safety mindset. And I think one of the key things is that while we're really good usually at recording incidents and, you know, work loss incidents, probably because that's a regulatory thing, we're not so great at recording near misses. And actually the near misses are probably the critical ones, because the near miss is going to result in an incident if you don't do anything about it. So it's really good to get your team into that mindset, is anything that's a near miss, where they experience something where they thought, oh, that was a close call, that was pretty lucky, that needs to be recorded, because that's the stuff that we should be working on trying to get rid of, so that we don't end up with an incident. Okay, so the next tool, and I'm just looking at the time, so I know that everyone's probably very exhausted, being quite late in the evening for you. But the last tool is 5S, and this is really basically about workplace organisation, and it's an extremely powerful tool. So these are photos from our farm, and we are still on this journey of 5S. So we're working through all our different workshops and areas of our farm. This is another key tool that our team absolutely cry for. So Our team are driving this, they want it, and because it just makes their life so much easier. And so you can see a couple of our workshops. One, the photo down below on the left is one of our pump rooms from our dairy shed or milking parlour. We've got 2 rotary 50-bale rotary sheds, and the top one is from one of our workshops. So on the right, you can see the same pump room. So you can see suddenly that we don't actually need toilet paper and all sorts of empty buckets and different things, chemicals which shouldn't even be there. We don't need any of that stuff in that pump room. So you can see suddenly by doing some workplace organisation and working out, well, what do we actually need in this area? What do we not need? Clearing all that clutter, making a much safer workplace. You can imagine if you're trying to clamber over all of these things in these workshops to try and get to stuff, well, A, it's going to take you a long time to try and find what you need. That's a waste of time for you. But also, you're going to probably create a safety incident by climbing over all these things to try and get to what you need. So you're creating a much safer, much better organised workplace where you have only what you need in that work area. You're creating systems of organisation. So you can see on the right-hand side, these are examples of some of our shadow boards. Again, on my website, I've got a few 2-minute videos just demonstrating how we went through developing our shadow boards and things like that. We use little bins like this to organise stuff. And it just means that if you're looking for a tool or you need a tool, you know exactly where to go. It's there. If it's not there, we use tags with photos of the team. So when a person takes a tool, they leave their tag in that spot. So if someone comes to look for that tool, they know exactly who's got it. They don't need to phone anyone asking people if they've seen this. But importantly, it creates the accountability so that tool goes back onto that shadow board. And since we've implemented this in the dairy shed, we implemented this about again 2.5–3 years ago, we have not had anything go missing. So it's an extremely powerful tool for your better organisation and efficiency, safety. It makes life so much less frustrating. A really powerful tool, 5S, which has 5 steps in it. So it stands for sorting, setting in order, shining, standardizing, and then sustaining. But you can read about that again in the book and have a look at some of those videos on the website. So a really powerful tool. We've talked a little bit about this, Dylan. So this was one of the actions. How's that going?
Yeah, so this is kind of ongoing with us at the minute, but it's something that we're definitely going to have in place for calving. Yeah, so there's the tools that are needed in the different areas of the farm are there on hand, rather than having to go on a wild goose chase around 10 different locations to find a hammer or a screwdriver.
Yeah, excellent. And that's right. You know, you can apply this for all parts of your farm. You can have a special fencing area or a fencing toolbox that has all the right stuff in it. You can have a water trough area, you know, with all the things that you need for fixing water troughs. Most certainly during calving, you know, you can have calving boxes that are sitting in the paddock. Well, I think you carve in the barns, but we carve out in paddocks. So, you know, one of the things we do have is a standardized carving toolbox that stays basically in the paddock. So if someone needs certain medications or something, obviously, you know, it can be quite a timely thing. So you don't have time to be driving somewhere for an hour to go and get what you need. It needs to be right there and then. So all those different examples are applying this tool will significantly help with your efficiency and reducing some of that unnecessary waste, motion, etc. So now I have got the last poll question.
Yeah, so you should be able to see the poll on your screens now. So the question is, how do you think lean could improve your farm business? and you're selecting one option again. So reduce time, reduce cost or improve profitability, improve productivity or performance, improve team engagement, or not at all. So you could all vote now. Whilst people are voting, I think one of the encouraging things about the last section there, Jana, is like the shadow boards, for instance, they're not high cost solutions, are they? They're, you know, fairly cheap to implement.
Yeah, absolutely. So and on my video I talk about how we've done it, and we've done it cheaply. Okay, they look a little bit more fancy because we have used steel pegboards, but realistically, when I've worked with farms, different farms, even just getting a bit of ply on a wall, even if you've just got a wall, and every time you go to your workshop, stick one nail into it and draw the outline of one tool, you know, whether it's a wrench or a hammer or whatever. If you do that every single day, it literally takes you 1 minute to do that. Soon you'll have a shadow board. So it doesn't need to be complicated. Our shadow board's probably in that fancy format, so we haven't done it with paint or anything. We've got on our online, sort of the equivalent of eBay, we just got a roll of this interior exterior vinyl, and we've just cut out the shapes, and it probably took us maybe 2 hours of cutting out our shapes, and probably not even that, 1.5 hours of cutting out the shapes and sticking them on the board, and to get a pretty fancy shadow board. So it's not a huge amount of time, and you can keep it as simple you know, as you want.
That sounds like a good homeschooling activity, I reckon. Right, we've got the results in of our poll. So 17% of people are saying that reduce time, 11% say reduce cost or improve profitability. We've got 48% of people saying that they think that lean could help improve productivity or performance, 21% improve team engagement, and we have got 3% that are saying that lean is not for them.
Okay, excellent.
Yeah, so we've got quite a few questions coming in, but I think one that's sort of the really key one, I suppose, is where would you start with lean? Because it can be quite intimidating. There's so much to think about. Yeah,
so most certainly what I would think about is, what is your priority as a farm business? So is it to do a succession? Is it to reduce your hours? Is there some particular metric that you have, whether it's production, your herd size, the growth that you want on your farm? You know, you've got to think about what is your particular key priority as a business. And that's a good starting point. So for example, if it is time, right? If you want to be able to work only 30-hour work week instead of a 60-hour work week, then starting to understand where your time is spent is a good starting point. So if you look at those 8 wastes, if you start tracking, and this is something we did try to work a little bit with Dylan on it, but we've done it a bit on our farm, is tracking our motion and our activities from morning till night. And what you'll start to see is where your time is being spent and what kind of activities you're working on. And by doing that, you can then start to identify, well, okay, is this hour of me having to go back and fix a fence that wasn't fixed right the first time round, was that value added? Probably not. So what can I do to ensure that I don't have to ever do that again? So you can start to work out, well, what are the things that I'm spending my time on that I shouldn't be spending my time on? And then start implementing some of these lean tools, whether it's the 5S workplace organization, because you've just spent an hour looking for a wrench or a hammer or a thistle grubber that you've lost somewhere in a paddock. That's the kind of stuff that you want to be looking at. If your priority is improving production, then you're going to have a look at, well, what is my target production? Where am I actually now? And then you can start to break that down and identify, well, okay, if my production target is 50% over where I'm at the moment, what is it that's preventing me from getting there? by breaking that down, you can start taking actions for each of those things to start to achieve those production targets. So, you know, production has been a big one for us, more so for reducing our cow numbers and getting more production out of those cow numbers. So we've done quite a bit of work, and we're fortunate where we've got quite an automated system, so we're able to get a lot of data out of our system, and we've been able to start analysing, you know, cow by cow, our production, understanding the impact of feed, whether there is any relationship between the amount we're feeding cows and the amount that they're producing. Starting to dive into all those details to look at how we can increase that production. Looking at even things like heat stress, you know, all of those kind of things are actions that you need to start taking if that's one of your keys. So whatever your priority is, that will be where you're going to focus. If work hours are a priority and organising your team, standardised work and visualisation is going to be key. It will make an immediate impact for that. So it really depends on your personal circumstances and what your priorities as a farmer is.
Oh, thank you very much for that. I think we're just running over time, but there's a couple of questions that I'm quite keen that we do cover, and Dylan, I'd like to come to you as well, really. How do you manage in the short term with staff leaving or sickness, whilst also trying to reduce work hours and keep staff motivated? And Dylan, I know Hannah's been off on maternity leave, so you've been on skeleton staff for a little while, so I thought I might come to you first with that.
Yeah, so I suppose a classic example was, so back in March, Hannah had a baby 2 days into lockdown, and everything seemed fine. We had a full team of staff and there was no issues. And then one of the staff had to self-isolate for 2 weeks, and another one of the staff, her daughter was, our relief milker, her daughter had a baby, so she went to hospital with her and had to self-isolate for 2 weeks. And our student had to leave because of college regulations. So within a week, we lost half our team. So we had 3 members of staff and a relief milker with 580 odd cows just calved. And we thought, how the hell are we going to get through it? But by actually being organised and giving people kind of a designated role and a task to take care of, I think we were on kind of like it was a 12 on 2 off, but between the 4 of us, we maintained a 12 on 2 off rota. We were I can't remember exactly, but we were probably working slightly more hours than we would have if we'd have had kind of the 5 or 6 of us here together. That was quite powerful, really, for the 3 or 4 of us that were still here, that we could do it. And if we prioritised our day and kind of just prioritised, was organised with our approach to every day, we would be fine, and we were.
Excellent. Well, just before we wrap up then, Jana, I'll give the final word to you. How do you keep people enthused, and how do you get ideas for lean management practice to actually come from the team on the farm?
Yeah, so that's been a big focus for us. Our business is probably quite different to many farms in the UK. We've got quite a large team. And so the cultural element and getting them on board and driving it has been really important for us. And so we do a lot of different things where the team are involved in almost everything. So from our annual strategy day, which we have in our dry off period during June, so we've already scheduled the date for this coming June, we have it off-site where the whole team is involved in developing our goals and our strategy for the next year and our key focus areas. We have weekly continuous improvement sessions, so every Wednesday from 9:30 to 10:30. We don't do it during calving period, but for the rest of the year we do. the whole team get together and we work on continuous improvement. So whether it's developing our shadow boards, whether it's brainstorming, whether it's doing additional lean training, or whatever improvement that the team prioritizes, we do role plays, we talk about all sorts of different things in those continuous improvement sessions. So that's where we really get the drive. And then also we have a person in our team that's our continuous improvement sort of champion, and they're the ones that kind of then drive implementation. So they coordinate the rest of the team to implement things and drive the continuous improvement. Every month we have what we call is our big picture breakfast. So we do a breakfast or a lunch, and that's on the first Wednesday of every month. And in that session, we talk about big picture stuff. So what's happening in the industry, the team share things that they've learned. We run through all of our audits from the previous month from the farm, and we identify, you know, key improvements that we need to make going forward. So we've got so many outside, I guess, we don't just do farming, if that makes sense. We're a part of our normal work on farm is doing all sorts of other things like this, which is really rare, you know, for other farming businesses. And it's most certainly something our team just love, because they're involved in all sorts of stuff. We have constant visitors on our farm. We have constant functions, whether it's Teachers' Day, and our team are expected to present to them. So they're learning all sorts of other skills as well, and they're involved in, you know, so many different elements of the business, not just their everyday roles and responsibilities.
Yeah, whilst you say that's quite unusual, actually farming life is just so varied that efficiency, we've got to strive for it all the time, haven't we? And I think, you know, AHDB, there's a KPI Express tool which is there to help people think about which are their key performance indicators. So yeah, I'd encourage people to look that up as a good starting point as well for some of the visual management boards stuff that we've been talking about this evening. So yeah, apologies that we've just run slightly over time, but I'll just sort of close things now. We've got a few things, further support then to advertise from AHDB. You can see a picture here. We've got some whiteboards that are available to dairy levy payers that are designed to actually help you with your time management and designed to help you prioritise tasks. So if you'd like any more information about those, or to order one, then please contact your local AHDB Knowledge Exchange manager. All their details are on the AHDB website on the Meet the Team page if you don't know who your local AHDB person is. But this could be your first step towards sort of embracing a leaner farm system. And I think it's very key that we all start to think about valuing our time in the spirit of the lean management stuff that we've been talking about this evening. Yeah, so if we just move on a slide, if you're listening in Wales, then don't forget that there is a whole host of Farming Connect support available too, and of course the AHDB strategic farm programs delivered alongside Farming Connect. So finally, it really just remains for me to say a huge thank you to both of you. Jana, it's been a real pleasure to work with you. One of the benefits of being online is that geography and travelling time are no longer an issue. So that's really been our advantage today. So thank you so much. And no maybe even more importantly, Dylan and the whole team at Tyddyn, because it's not just you. You've all really embraced the lean management project. I think it's fair to say it's not always easy to try new ways of doing things. And I know that one of the processes we had you doing was one man milking 550 cows as a tester. So my heart really went out when you were doing those things. But I really think that it's your whole team, you know, you're a bit of a pioneering attitude really that sets you aside, and I know that the quest for that ultimate work-life balance is still a progress, but you know, you've got a full support, and thank you for all the effort that you put into being a strategic farm host and your willingness to share. So diolch yn fawr iawn. due to the huge amount of interest that we've had in this evening's webinar, we're thinking about running a more interactive session on lean management before long. So if you're listening, just look out for that. Feel free to get in touch with your AHDB staff for any more information. And if you're listening again on the YouTube channel, I'd remind you to subscribe. And there is currently an opportunity to feed into the AHDB 5-year strategy. So we've got a consultation running until the 31st of January. More information on that is available on our website as well. And there'll be more information in the follow-up email if you're listening live. So we really do value your views. So thanks for joining us, and we wish you all the best if you're just starting out on your own lean management journey. Night.